Download the app from the App and Play Store.
Welcome to Sunrise YouTube. I'm Shabnam Sahi. We're discussing our changing world on Sunrise with Dr. Selva Pankaj, CEO, Regent Group. Now, Selva, this time we're going to talk about what you have termed today's greatest adventure.
Yeah.
And we talk about how success, as you said, you defined it as a progressive realization of a worthy goal. And you've mentioned in this chapter how sometimes when we are working towards a goal, it seems so distant that halfway on that journey, somewhere along the path, we almost give up hope and we become disheartened. And the goal tends to become a little hazy. And that is when you say it is crucial for us to live one day at a time to the fullest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to explain that a little bit more?
Sure. I think as you correctly said, so once you set the goal, as you said, as long as you're progressing on the goal, you're growing and then you are succeeding, so you're fine. The best way to do this is take one day at a time. And I think when we say one day at a time, if you just do well on that day, and it's like us talking about that castle, putting that little stone, and suddenly one day, Rome wasn't built in one day, as they call it. So that's the sort of philosophy behind. Today is the greatest adventure. If you can do a good day's work, and that's fine. Just, you have a good rest in the evening and you start again. So something so simple, so basic, but nevertheless, it's not fully understood.
In fact, you also say that it is the unrelenting and successful succession of single days.
That's right.
That add up towards where you're headed.
Absolutely.
Now, we were talking about learning as well, right? You wanted to say, how would you define learning, or what exactly does it come down to when you say learning is important? It's an important path. It is the only path that is going to lead us to our goals.
That's right. I think it's very important. I think in education we have terminology, teaching, we talk about learning, and again it comes down to paradigms. And I think teaching is sort of you're sharing the information. But the way that we define learning is when we consciously entertain an idea. So you have learned something you've been taught. So we are talking about various things. You consciously then entertain an idea. You emotionalize that idea. So you're taking to your subconscious mind, not just keeping on the conscious mind. We act on the idea because you will act on it when it comes to the subconscious mind, as we previously said, because you're emotionally getting involved. And you observe a change in results. That's in our view and in our research, it's learning. And I think our paradigms sometimes have said, if you remember information, if you put them into a piece of paper, whether it's a report or an assignment or exam paper, then you get a certificate. We say, I've learned it. In our humble opinion, that is gathering information. And that's good, that's needed, and that's perfect, because if it doesn't come, you can't slip it down. So we are not saying that piece is not important. All we are saying, once it comes into your conscious mind, make an effort and make a specific thing to emotionally involve with that idea and bring it down. Then that is learning. And I think the schools sometime, I'm not saying all the schools, what we really do is we stop at the conscious level. We talked about previously about those habits and the information comes in. We just leave it there. So we learn all sorts of good things. What we are learning here. We can talk about it. We might be able to then repeat it, remember it. That doesn't mean we are emotionally getting involved and slipping it down. That psychic barrier. Just slip it in, and then it's autopilot.
Now, when we talk about living one day at a time to the fullest and to the best, we're essentially also talking about time management, right? That is something you delve into in great detail in this chapter. So is it about also not just one day at a time, but one activity per day at a time that we need to concentrate on?
I think it's interesting. Earl Nightingale is who actually puts this really nicely on one of the research paper. And he said, no one manages time. Time cannot be managed. We can merely manage activities. I think I completely believe in that. How can we manage time? So I think, again, we use these terminologies, I think, sort of loosely. You got to have time management. There are time management courses. But if you really ask the question, can you? Can you really manage time? How do you manage time? It's clicking. You can't manage time. But what you can really do is you can manage those activities. And that's what we are really saying. Again, this is where we have a conversation about language. If you really understand the language and you have the vocabulary, again, the nature works with that. So if you say, I'm going to time manage, how do you do that? It will never manage time. So that's why the language should be appropriate in accordance with the law of nature. And I think, again, loosely we do that. And again, we are not saying that is right or wrong, but again, it's a slang. But what they really mean it, manage your activity. But they simply say, oh, you got to time manage. But we are just trying to be very precise in our research.
And in also saying that, it's about living one day at a time to the best of your capabilities.
Correct.
Not worrying too much about tomorrow or day after or the day after.
Absolutely.
But bearing in mind that ultimate goal, right? Bearing in mind where you're headed.
Absolutely. I mean, in our philosophy, even the worry, doubts, we don't believe in all of that. So those are the negative thoughts, because if you entertain for a moment, what you ask in life, you get it. So if you have those, that becomes your goal. So if you think that something is going to go wrong, if you dwell on it, it slips into your subconscious. You track it, and they say, "Why did that happen?" Because you invited it. And it's there's another book by Neville. He talks about the whole thing about imagination, and he says, everything happens up to now in my life and everybody else's life, the sum of my thoughts up to now. So I'm sitting here, I'm doing this, and who I am, it's the thoughts up to now. What's going to happen tomorrow is going to be the thoughts from now. I can change that.
And I suppose that is why people say things like, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, it happens.
Right?
Again, it's a slang, you can call it, you can time management, all these slang. So people just take pieces of it. It's sometime you take something from it, they talk about it, it goes, again, conformity, somebody else said it, you use it as a slang, but they don't necessarily go behind it and understand what does it really means. It really means if you wish for, you'll have it, whatever it is.
Now, when we look at managing our activities, for instance, from close quarters, you talk about how it is important for us to prioritize our tasks every day, and also something which we all know, but it's very hard to do, is the ability to say no when you're prioritizing, right? I mean, then again, we need to train ourselves really to be able to do that, right?
Again, we don't necessarily, again it comes back to language. Again, whether there is an option to say no, or you can say yes but as well. So there are various ways to manage that piece of language in terms of the situation. So by saying no, and sometimes you've got to say no. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think what we're really talking about here is the prioritization. So once you want to take one day at a time, you simply need to ask the question, look, what are the most important things I need to do
today?
That's all it is. So you just say, okay, and you list them. And I think there's a great story about, in the US, someone talked about this. But the crux of it is you simply list them. When you're listing them, do not think about the priority itself. And we talk about list 6. It could be 6, it could be 5, it could be 7. It doesn't really matter. But you list them, and let's say 5 or 6, you do. After listing them, you look at all the 5 and say, you know what? What is the first one I got to do? It could be the 4th one you wrote, but that could be the first one in order of priority. Just go and do it. Just do that first. And then progress on that until to a point, let's say, you can't do anything. Somebody will have to give you a piece of a report or information. You got to wait for that information to come in. Then you say, all right, now let me go to what's the second one then. And then you go to the second one. And if you keep doing that, the 6 may become 8, 8 may become 10, who knows? But nevertheless, it's a simple methodology. And you can do it on the phone. I do that now all the time. I get up in the morning and I just put my things to do. Then I think, you know what, which is the first one I'm going to tackle it? And the problem is sometimes we waste time in unnecessary, trivial things which is not contributing towards our goal. That's where your no perhaps is important. You know what, I'm not doing it. That's not a priority for today. Maybe for tomorrow. Not today.
Now, in this chapter, Selva, you've also listed constructive tips for everyday planning, right? So it's practically you've laid out exactly as you're saying how you might achieve this. I'm not going to say time management because I know it's not time management, activity management, right?
That's right.
And you say wonderful things like when you sum it up that, don't look at a thing, start it. Don't imagine that it's too difficult, start it. Don't put it off for another day, start it now. And don't start it half-heartedly. Put everything you can muster into your start and turn that it can't be done into, with a forceful start, it can be done.
100%. Absolutely. And I think that's absolutely true, because you're doing it after giving due consideration for what's your tasks you said you were going to do and in what priority. So you have given thought that needs to be done, and then you ask the question whether it is a effective activity towards your goal. That's the key. And then I have wasted so much time on areas but sometime you should also allow the law of nature as well. The law of attraction is there as well. Sometime, you may need to be attending certain events. You don't know whether you should.
Yeah.
So again, you got to. It's a fine art. It's not a science. It's an art. But nevertheless, the highest is just concentrate on. You can't do too many things. If you do too many things not properly, you're better off doing few things properly. Is what this concept is all about. But each and every one of us will have to find our own way. I mean, these are not sort of rocket science.
Yeah,
these are
because
simple things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's always going to be unforeseen, unexpected things that happen in your life.
Absolutely. You
That's
can't
what
turn
life is
around
all
and
about.
say, I'm on task 4,
Yeah.
and the house is in fire, I'll finish it and I'll come. Your house won't be there.
Yeah.
So again, it's you got to apply these things in a sensible, practical manner. But again, that's where these are just little tools for you to play with, but you just cannot take it as gospel. You just need to find your own way to reform. What's the best way to do things?
So in summing up how you are urging us to look at every single day as the greatest day of your life, what would you say to somebody who's watching the video right now? How, as you're saying, we start from the very beginning, which is by listing all the things that we intend to do that day and then prioritizing, right?
That's right. I mean, there is two schools of thought. Some people say, do that before you even go to bed. So before you go to bed, you're retiring for the day.
Think about the next day kind of thing.
Next about the day, put everything through, and then when you get up, you know exactly you're going. So you just zoom into task 1. Things may have changed now, and let's say with the emails world, you get up in the morning, 9 o'clock an email might come, you got to change. Sometimes people do it in the morning with a fresh mind. You get up and say, what's the day is going to look like before the trading day starts or day starts. Then you sort of tackle the first one, but do what is right for you. But the theory or the philosophy or the idea remains the same. Just concentrate on key things. Prioritize there. If you don't finish it, not a big deal. Just do it tomorrow. Sometimes we go and do what needs to be done in 2 weeks' time. Sometimes it's not to do anything, and then thinking about things is so valuable. Lots of CEOs are now talking about, I think Ned Taylor, the Microsoft CEO, talks about, he allocates time not to do anything, purely to sit and think and imagine where Microsoft is going. So if you're so busy,
so he's made time for that as well.
Yeah, he's made time for that. He will just say, I'm X time I'm spending with my customers, X time I'm doing this, X time, and this is my not downtime, just sort of dwelling
because
about.
That is helping him to think about the company and then again think about the next steps of where he needs to be personally and where he needs to take the company.
And then in this particular book by Carol Dweck is actually one of his son has got some learning difficulties. So what happened when he took the company in 2014, his wife actually read the book first, and they actually read the book for their son who has got learning difficulties. Then he thought, what? This might work for Microsoft. And then he thought, I'm going to really talk about this with my first senior team. And then he expanded that. And then the second chapter, when Dweck published it, who wrote the foreword? Bill Gates. He thought, my share price is now 3 times. And not just for that, to inspire others. So what we are really talking is a really important stuff. So people can really read this book or the program, or they can read anything. It's all out there, different versions of it.
Yeah.
But we're not saying this is the only version. But this kind of thinking is important if you really want to grow.
Also, as you very rightly pointed out, it is to make our goals not seem that daunting, right? Because we are breaking it down into, this is the day, in this 24-hour clock, this is what I need to do in this order.
Exactly. That's
and
all
then the
you
greater,
can do.
larger picture will take care of itself.
Yeah, the things will happen. That's where, another lesson we sort of talk about the creation and disintegration, and that's where the whole thing of mental science and the mental health comes in. Soon as you're in the positive mindset, and that comes knowledge through study, and then you have the faith of things happening. And again, it is not faith in religious context. We are saying this is faith based on understanding of how the thing works. And when you are in that space and you are moving into understanding all of them, things will sort of come together, and you just got to believe it'll come together. Again, what you wish for, as you previously said. If you believe, it's not going to happen, it won't happen. And if you just say, what, it'll be fine. I've done this. It could be anything. You will sit next to somebody in the plane. You will sit next to somebody in the bus. You will sit next to somebody in the dinner. And then you will say, I'm doing this. And they'll say, this is what it is. And it suddenly connects. How did that happen?
Yeah. And as you've mentioned in previous conversations, that one good way to start is to imagine that it has happened already.
Absolutely. 100%. I completely now believe in that. And if you really look at some of the leaders, whether it is the Churchills of the world or any of the leaders, and if you read their memoirs, they have got that imagination. They're already in that space, and they're simply waiting
to join the dots and
and
arrive.
Then you're absolutely right. That's glad you talked about dots, and this is what Steve Jobs said. He said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. So you look at your journey and you can connect the dots looking backwards. He said you can never connect the dots looking forward. You can never. But you got to believe the dots will connect.
Download the app from the App and Play Store.